Getting as much tips if you're a waiter or waitress. Your restaurant is not as busy.
Currency. I said cryptocurrency. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. See? Yes, sir. Read. Silent but deadly. Love and peace, brother.
But my fear is that this regulatory state, it's going to crack down on an industry that the regulators, they really don't understand yet. And it's going to force the next generation of financial tech to be created outside of our country. Well, we can't let that happen. So, Mr. Brooks, it's good to see you again. Where do companies draw the line and say that enough is enough with this anti-innovation, quote, regulation by enforcement, and then just decide to take their industry elsewhere to another country? Where's the line?
Well, Mr. Budd, it's good to see you, and thank you for that question. What I would say is, in some aspects of the industry, the line is super clear. There are some products that are legal in other countries and are just not legal here. So I take some of the investment products we've talked about earlier today, for example, exchange-traded funds. One of the things that makes crypto risky is that consumers may not understand the difference between one token and another token, and so they may want to diversify, much as I own an S&P 500 mutual fund. We don't allow that in the United States. We do allow it in Canada. We allow it in Germany, Singapore, Portugal, and a number of other places. So if you're a developer of those products, there's no fuzzy line. It's super clear. You can't do that here. So you have to go abroad. Okay? There's some other places.
Can you say why we can't do that here?
Sure. It's because the Securities and Exchange Commission has consistently refused to approve products that other G20 nations have approved.
So we're behind the curve?
Unquestionably.
So given your previous experience running the OCC, I'd love to hear your perspective on where a regulator's authority begins and ends. Remember the joke earlier this year that everything's infrastructure? Well, it seems like Chairman Gensler thinks that everything is a digital asset that he can regulate. He cites the Howey and the Reeves test without providing any other explanations. So, Mr. Brooks, what are we missing? Because Chairman Gensler clearly doesn't see a limit to his regulatory authority in this area.
Well, Congressman, one thing I learned running my little agency is that the U.S., and this is not specific to crypto, the U.S. is sort of unique among the developed countries in our fragmented approach to regulation. So when I hear people talk about the idea that we need one regulator for crypto, I would say we should first have one regulator for banks, but we have 3 of them. Or if you're an investment bank, 5 of them. So that's inherent in the system that we've got. What I say to that is the last thing we need to do is add another regulator to a system that's already got dozens of regulators. What we need to do instead is have parity for crypto activity along with traditional finance. If I'm a crypto lending platform, I should probably be regulated by the FDIC. If I'm a crypto trading platform, I should probably be regulated by the CFTC and SEC. But somehow we treat crypto, because it's new, as different from everything else. And I'm going to argue that crypto is just a step function improvement in the system. We already have a regulatory system. The laws are super clear how it works. But there's something about crypto that scares people. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because it's new. But I remember in my banking law class when banks were first allowed to use computers to keep ledgers, people sued over that at the time. I remember when I was a second-year lawyer and we got email.
Is there any way to fundamentally, or to using fundamentals to explain the action in crypto?
Well, I do think crypto did get caught up in the global macro sell-off of all asset classes. And then there was a bit of excess leverage in the system through May and June. I think most of that's been worked out. And in the next few months, crypto can start trading independently of risk assets.
We have had it posited that both gold and crypto, the scarcity, the dollar devaluation worries that we see when the Fed is in emergency mode, where we were either during the financial crisis and some would say continued all the way through the pandemic, that all that dollar printing is bullish for things like Bitcoin and gold. And when the Fed is in tightening mode, that obviously that the second derivative has changed. We're headed the other way. And just by definition, people start saying, I mean, Dan, it's down, Bitcoin's down from over 60,000 to 18,000. I mean, or 19,000. You need to be prepared. Some stocks do that too. I think Zoom's down more than that. But Obviously it's hard to just assign a clear value to crypto.
Yeah, I think the important thing to keep in mind here is crypto is such a disruptive thing that's going to change so many aspects of our lives over the next couple of decades. It's in a secular bull market, and it does occasionally get caught up in these cyclical downdrafts of risk assets. But I can easily see a world a few years from now where risk assets themselves might be still struggling, but blockchain's back to all-time highs and doing its own thing based on its own fundamentals. And that story is hundreds of millions of people use blockchain today. I think in 4 or 5 years it's going to be literally billions of people. And the way to value things is supply and demand. If you have a billion people that want to buy a fixed number of coins, the price probably goes up.
So in the meantime, what do you hear in terms of the regulatory landscape in the United States, for example, and how do you prepare for that? Gary Gensler's not going to be there forever. I don't, neither, the makeup of the Senate and the House, who knows? But what do you expect down the road? Is it positive that we get some, we finally understand exactly what regulation looks like, or is it going to be detrimental to crypto when it finally comes?
Well, you have to view it as a glass 7/8 full. 7 out of the 8 big agencies in the U.S. have already ruled on crypto, and they ruled quite early. Some, like the IRS, ruled in 2013, and all those rulings are literally the best possible rulings. So the only one left is the SEC. It would be helpful if they gave more guidance on what is a security and what is not a security, and hopefully within the next year or so that will come out.
Do you foresee any, if we were to test more lows, are we going to see a systemic issue with some companies? Are they on the edge right now? Won't mention any names, but there's a lot of people that are leveraged to crypto, a lot of companies.
Yeah, my sense from having traded cycles for 35 years, that we're pretty much through the worst of it. That was 4 months ago that some of the centralized finance companies in our space hit the wall. And when you have a market go down 75, 80%, you add any leverage on that, it's going to be tough. And so I think most of that has already washed out. And a really important point is, we all are used to using Bitcoin as a proxy for blockchain. There are hundreds of really interesting projects, and a lot of them are rallying and have done quite well. And a cool stat is the percentage of our entire market, which is not Bitcoin or Ethereum, hit a record yesterday at 43%.
Let's step back from digital assets and blockchain for a moment. Let's talk about where the internet was, where it's come to, where it's going, right? We're trying to level set here for policymakers. So originally, the internet was a read-only format, in essence. We're consuming information. And then there's additional layers that we place on. It became much more interactive. But counterintuitively, much more interactive, but much more centralized in Web 1, Web 2. What we're hearing now is Web 3. Policymakers need to understand the nature of Web 3. This is a hearing about a component of Web 3. Now, along those lines, what are the characteristics that defined Web 1 and Web 2?
Mr. McHenry, thank you very much for that question. I think that's critical to understanding what we're all trying to build here. So the characteristic of Web 1, if people remember their original AOL account, was an ability to look in a curated walled garden at a set of content that was not interactive but was presented to you on AOL the way that Time magazine used to show you the articles they wanted you to see inside of their magazine. Just you could see it on a screen. The innovation of Web 2 was that suddenly you could not only read content, but you could also write content. This is when the blogosphere became a big thing. People remember this from the late 90s, the early 2000s. The reason for the centralization of the internet, of course, was that all of that activity was being monetized by a very small number of companies. Facebook, as the chairwoman mentions, Google, and 2 or 3 other companies. What makes Web 3 different is the ability to own the actual network. And that's what crypto assets themselves represent, is an ownership stake in an underlying network. So when you hear people talk about, for example, layer 1 tokens, what they mean is this is your reward for providing the ledger maintenance services, the computing power to the network that on Web 1 and 2 was done by Google, right? So now people in my hometown of Pueblo, Colorado can actually own the Ethereum network, but they can't own the internet. That's owned by Google and a few other companies. That's what the project of crypto is all about, is allowing people to directly own the networks that have native assets that are supporting it. And that's the nature of decentralization, where the token holders are the people who control the asset, not
so
Google.
Token holders, for our language here on the Hill, those are digital assets, right, which are the keys to open up the ledger for you to participate, right? So describe to us how those digital assets fit into this internet revolution, Web 3.
So the concept is that you have sort of application layer tokens and you have protocol layer tokens. So if I'm an owner of Bitcoin, let's say that I'm a miner of Bitcoin, somebody who actually creates Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is the reward I receive for doing the work to keep the network operational, and that allows me to own a piece of the Bitcoin blockchain. Or take Ethereum, which is easier to understand. The Ether token represents an ownership stake in the network, but on top of that network are all kinds of apps that get built on the network, much like the apps on your phone depend on the underlying network existing that lets the phone operate. And so people will make judgments about which network is likely to win, and they will invest in the tokens in that network much the same way you might invest in Google stock because you think Google is going to scale access to the original internet. The difference being here, you can vote on what happens in the future of a proof of stake network, for example. You can get rewarded through a proof of work token for maintaining a ledger on something like Bitcoin. But the real message here is that what happens on the decentralized internet is decided by the investors, versus what happens on the main internet is decided by Twitter, Facebook, Google, and a small number of other companies.
Okay, so getting this layer on digital assets right, for Congress to understand this, everything is built upon that on-ramp to this new internet. So very important for us to be sensitive to how this develops and any actions we take in terms of laws and updating laws to incorporate these new technologies.
Yeah, Mr. McHenry couldn't agree more, and I think when you hear about all of the problems of different big tech companies, the importance of an owner-controlled network becomes clear.
Okay, owner-controlled network rather than a cooperative, right? And thinking in those terms.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you're not a part of management, you're not making a decision in Web 2. If you are a participant in the network, you're cooperating in the making of those decisions.
Exactly right.
Okay. So I ask this not to be insulting to the panel, but to have a level set here so we have an understanding of what we're talking about. This is not simply about you on this panel. It is about trillions of dollars of assets that did not exist before Satoshi wrote his white paper 13 years ago. It's about $3 trillion in notional value at this stage around the development of a whole new range, whole new suite of technology that will be developed across the globe, whether or not the United States embraces it and wants to compete, or if it's pushed offshore. So as policymakers, we need to understand what we're talking about here. This is a small panel, important as you may be.
Web 3. Some are calling it the next phase of the internet. But what exactly is it? Essentially, Web 3 is an internet that proponents say is owned by users. So what does that mean? Right now, the internet is dominated by a handful of companies like Meta, Amazon, and Google. Chances are a lot of the online platforms you use are dominated by one of these giants. Web3 would cut out the middleman and spread ownership among users with blockchain technology. Now, blockchain is a system where cryptocurrency transactions are stored across thousands of computers as opposed to a centralized network. So Web3, in theory, basically takes the internet out of the hands of the few companies that control it and spreads that power to users.
Proponents of Web offices have gone remote. And while I miss seeing the people I work with, I think remote work is here to stay for a lot of people. So we're going to need better tools to work together. Let's take a look at what working in the metaverse will be like. Imagine if you could be at the office without the commute. You would still have that sense of presence, shared physical space, those chance interactions that make your day all accessible from anywhere. Now imagine that you have your perfect work setup and you can actually do more than you could in your regular work setup. And on top of all that, you can keep wearing your favorite sweatpants.
Looking good. Let's get together real quick for a debrief.
free now. Let's jump in. Hi.
Hey.
So what do we think?
I think it's ready.
Great.
I'll prep it for the presentation.
All right. Good luck.
Imagine a space where you can tune out distractions and focus on the task at hand. And when you're ready to share what you've been working on, you can present it as if you're right there with the team.
Wait, where's Mark?
I think he's in the middle of something.
And part of the infrastructure law, we're investing $7.5 billion to build electric vehicle charging stations all across America. So today, I'm pleased to announce we're approving funding for the first 35 states, including Michigan, to build their own electric charging infrastructure throughout their state. And y'all are going to be part of a network of 500,000 charging stations. 500,000 throughout the country, installed by the IBEW. Boy, I owe a special thanks to for the last election. Look, folks, the Great American Road Trip is going to be fully electrified. Whether you're driving coast to coast along I-10 or on I-75 here in Michigan. Charging stations will be up and easy to find as gas stations are now. We're also going to invest $7 billion to make American car companies and have the batteries and other critical materials they need. The auto companies like Ford, GM, Stellantis, I still am inclined to say that other word, Chrysler. My dad worked for them for a while. Are all our partners here. They made commitments. We're investing billions of dollars in themselves to go electric.
Regulators in California are expected to approve new rules that will ultimately ban the sale of gas-powered cars in the state by 2035.
This is really important for reducing climate-changing emissions. I mean, simply put, we can't address climate change without addressing transportation emissions. It's the largest source of emissions in California.
The new rules will require 35% of new cars sold by 2026 to produce zero emissions. That number climbs to 68% by 2030. And by 2035, all new cars sold in California must be free of greenhouse gas emissions.
Having this standard means that automakers are going to have to make more electric vehicles. That means more models in different sizes and different price points.
Supporters call this a major step in the nation's transition to electric vehicles. Not only is California the largest auto market in the U.S., but more than a dozen states typically follow California's lead on setting emission standards.
Right now, I grew up within Claymont, Delaware, a little steel town. We went to the same Catholic grade school together, and he went on to the public school, and I went on to a Catholic high school, and he didn't go to college, and he's a good guy, and I've seen him. And anyway, for a while, I saw him at Christmas time. He walked up to me, and he goes, "Joey," grabs my cheek, and Secret Service nearly shot him. But he said, "What you doing?" I said, "Richie, what you doing?" He was an independent trucker. I said, "You still driving?" He said, "No, Joey, only guys like you that never worked in your life can continue to work." And he laughed, and he said, "No." I said, "I retired, Joey." I said, "How's your son doing?" He's a trucker, too. He said, "Doing okay now, Joey," but he knows he's in trouble. He knows he's in trouble. I said, "How's that? Can I help?" "Scott, can I help?" He looks at me and says, "No, Joey. There's going to be no truck drivers in 5 years over the road. Whether your predictions are true about automation and self-driving trucks, these folks aren't stupid. They listen to death. They're scared to death. This is a man who busted his rear end for a long, long time. But I really mean it. It breaks my heart.
Don't be surprised if you see driverless trucks on California roadways soon. The California DMV says it will allow the testing of commercial use driverless delivery vehicles and will begin approving new applications for that in 30 days. The new regulations apply to vehicles weighing less than 10,001 pounds, which could include driverless cars, mid-sized pickup trucks, and cargo vans like pizza or grocery delivery trucks.
A factory, so we can manufacture things and manufacture them here. How we move things, how a finished product moves from a factory to a store to your home. And today we have an important announcement that will get things you buy to the shelves faster. I'm joined by the Executive Director of the Ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, Gene Soroka, and Mario Cordono. I apologize, Mario. And the President of the International Longshoremen's Union, Willie Adams. Los Angeles and Long Beach are home to two of the largest ports in America, and together these ports are among the largest in the world. And the best way to make that point is that 40% of shipping containers that we import into this country come through these two ports. And today we have some good news. We're going to help speed up the delivery of goods all across America. After weeks of negotiation and working with my team and with the major union retailers and freight movers, the Port of Los Angeles announced today that it's going to begin operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This follows the Port of Long Beach's commitment to 24/7 that it announced just weeks ago. 24/7 system, what most of the leading countries in the world.
These are the automated ones. Our Stu Mundell over the Port of Los Angeles, seeing something unfold many folks probably didn't know about. The port is going automated. Artificial intelligence and digital technology are moving and powering commerce here.
These are drones.
Containers are lowered onto trailers, and within seconds, those trucks drive off. They know where to turn, where to drive, and where to drop off their cargo. They even yield to each other when one crosses in front of the other, and there are no humans in sight.
Four-wheel steering. These are cool.
The old supply chain, so to speak, is no longer in place.
Professor Nick Vyas is the executive director with the Center for Global Supply Chain Management at USC. As futuristic as this may look, Professor Vyas says we're way behind other countries.
That's just a small subset of what the automation being adopted in the rest of the world.
Professor Vyas is referring to ports like this one, Rotterdam in the Netherlands, Europe's busiest port, and it's also one of the world's most technologically advanced. Rotterdam officials say they've created a platform that will allow autonomous shipping using sensors placed on quay walls, waterways, and even dolphins. As exciting as the technology is, the evolution of it also has the potential of being very painful.
But the bigger picture, which people don't understand, is the cost and effect.
Mark Mendoza is the president of ILWU Local 13. He represents more than 8,000 longshoremen who work at the LA and Long Beach ports. Mendoza says automation could mean the end of hundreds or even thousands of jobs.
If you go to fully automated, it goes down, you say, the membership of 8,000, all these temporary casuals, we can go down to 800. These aren't $10 an hour jobs. These are jobs where it only takes one income to take care of your whole family.
Mendoza said,
Can you say if the United States, can you say if the U.S. is committed to provide...
This is an order that is essentially a starting place for the U.S. government in terms of how it's going to approach cryptocurrency on a macro level, and not just a one-off case, and not just one agency's approach. The order itself does not really implement something particularly new that is going to happen, and that people need to do right away. But I think it is a sign, that crypto is here to stay, that regulations will be coming. There are a lot of requirements in this order for the various departments in the U.S. government to report back. And just given the breadth of this order, I would bet that we're going to see more orders in the future with particular guidance. The U.S. dollar is obviously the preferred method of exchange throughout the world. That our economy would consider also adding a digital dollar, I think, is a huge endorsement to the technology, to the viability of blockchain, which has so many uses, and so I think it's perhaps the most significant part of this order.
I'm making that paper. Red dad, blue dad, I'm making that paper. Red dad, blue dad, I'm making that. How about you? I'm trying to fight this rock, bro. Yeah, no, I won't lose. How about you? Stick to the script, yeah, bro. Yeah, just like you. The poor get poor every day now, homie. Now I won't lose. How they are my shit and people, that's something that I can't choose. It's red dad, blue dad, I'm making that paper. Red dad, blue dad, I'm making that paper.